What's good, you guys? Daniel Cruz here. We back, another episode of Cook with Cruz. I got a really special episode for you guys today. This was actually a suggestion by somebody. Today I'm gonna really tap into mixing and everything that I do and what I think about it. I also had another really dope suggestion about structuring, and I do want to get into that too. I thought about combining the two, but I think the video would be crazy too long. Again, I'm not just gonna show you just exactly everything that I do. I am, but I'm gonna explain why I do what I do. So expect next Sunday I'm gonna go really into detail about structuring, and I definitely have a lot to say about that. So stay tuned next week for structuring. Today I wanted to tackle the what I consider a very important topic, which is mixing. And I'm gonna do this video a little different today. I'm probably gonna be doing a lot of explaining and talking more than usual to get my point and ideas across to you guys. So what I'm gonna do today is I'm going to resort back to an older beat that I made that you've probably seen in a recent episode, rather than showing you a new beat and making that from scratch. Again, I feel like if I did that, this video would be crazy long, and I don't want to bore you guys too long. I really want to get my point across here. With that being said, I'm probably going to do the same thing next week for structuring. I'm going to pull up a few different projects which actually became songs to, you know, really get my point across in explaining structuring and how you can approach that. So I hope you guys will like this approach that I'm doing today and next week. But anyways, let's get into today's video. Mixing, a very important topic. I got a lot I want to explain and talk about with you guys. Let's check it out. Alright, so before we get into anything here and how I mix my tracks here, I just want to say that I am not a professional. I'm not an engineer. A lot of stuff that I'm going to go over today is very opinion based, and I believe mixing alongside of production, anything in music generally, is something that is impossible to reach mastery or perfection. So again, these are my opinions, my techniques, my strategies. There is no right or wrong way to do this. This is just my approach on mixing here. The first thing that I want to talk about that's really big is that I see a lot of producers overthinking their mixing. I think it's very important to remember your role in the creation of a song here. If you're a producer, your job is basically to develop and create the sound of the record here. Your job isn't the engineer, where your job is literally to go in for hours on each track, EQing everything and just being very detailed with everything. Your job is to get your point across, so you don't have to waste countless hours whatever mixing your beats. I think that's honestly pointless and it's a waste of time. So I get asked fairly frequently how long I spend mixing my beats, and I honestly don't know because I mix as I go. So that's the big philosophy there that I want to get across. Stop wasting your time spending crazy amount of time mixing your beats when all that is not necessary. You can create a pretty good mix just off of some basic things that I'm going to show you I do here today. Don't get me wrong though, if your mix is like crazy muddy and it sounds completely terrible, then yeah, it's going to be a difficult time to try to get your idea across. I'm just saying, stop spending countless amounts of hours per beat or whatever just to mix it down. Leave that to the engineer. Unless you're both producer and engineer, then yeah, go for it. But if you're just a producer, leave that job to the engineer. Moving on to the second part, just really quick, I want to talk about mastering. I do not know a whole lot about mastering. I know it's when the engineer takes the final song and brings it up to volume so it could be played on radio, TV, you know, be bounced out to CDs and stuff like that. That's pretty much what mastering is. So if you're asking me if I master my beats or if you should master your beats, the answer would definitely be no, unless you're just an instrumentalist and you want to upload beats to Spotify or whatever. If you're making beats, productions to shop to an artist to eventually make a song, you should never master your beat, because what's going to happen is you've already mastered your beat, they record to it, and once the engineer goes to master it, it's essentially being mastered twice, and there's not going to be enough headroom for them to work with. So you're really just doing overkill if you're mastering your beats. So for mastering, it's a big no for me. Again, unless you're an engineer and you have access to the actual final song, the vocals and everything, then you can bring that up to a master. Some of you want to master your beats. That's cool. Again, I'm not going to, because it's going to allow more headroom for the artist and the engineer to work with. Okay, so now that I got those points across, I'm going to show you what I do here to get a pretty good mix for the artist so they can 2-track it, get it clean enough just to get that idea across. So the number one most important thing in my opinion is the levels of your instruments here. I do get complimented on my mix semi-frequently, and I get asked for advice on a better mix. And one of the big things that I noticed from producers sending me their tracks in for me to judge their mix is that their levels are just way too loud. And I understand that being a producer, when we want to get in our zone, get in our vibe, we don't want to work quietly, right? We want to have it turned up so we can get that feeling going. A lot of times we don't realize that we're just turning everything up on that mixer, and you're in the process of making the beat, and then once you get done with the beat, you realize the mix is not good at all. It sounds very muddy. So the levels are really important, because if you have like your main instruments all the way turned up, you've already used all of your dB space. There's going to be no volume left for if you want to add drums and stuff in. That's why if you notice, when you add drums on top of your instruments, it just sounds way too cluttered and muddy. It's because you used up all of your dB space and there's nothing left there to use. So one technique that I do to keep myself in check, to keep from having my levels too high, this is actually a technique by Johnny Giuliano. He did a YouTube tutorial on mixing like however many years ago. This is between like 2010 and 2012. He might have taken the video down, but the one thing that I took away from that video was to have your main instrument just slightly quieter than the metronome in your DAW here. In this case, I'm using FL Studio. So I got this beat here. You may recognize it from a previous episode. I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm going to play this pattern now with the metronome on, and that's going to be like the foundation for the overall loudness that I'm at. So here's our metronome here. We're going to use this as a reference for our peak loudness here. Now I'm going to bring in my main melody, and you're going to see that it's just underneath the volume of the metronome. So as you can hear there, my main melody is not on top of the metronome. It's just underneath the metronome. That is going to be my foundation right there. So as you're building the beat and you're adding extra instruments and stuff, you're going to know when stuff is too loud because it's overcrowding your main melody there. So back when I said I mix as I make the beat, I now have my foundation here, and every other instrument, drum that I add, I'm going to go in reference with my main melody now. And even as you can see on the mixer here, you notice all my faders aren't like super all the way up. A lot of them are turned down. You can see there, I got a lot of dB space to work with, a lot of volume to work with. It's going to allow everything to breathe, and your mix is going to sound 100% better, guaranteed. If that's your problem where your levels are too high, this is just going to fix it right away, and your drums are going to come out more and sound cleaner. So there goes my little lecture on levels there. I personally believe it is the most important part of the mix, and probably the biggest mistake other producers make. You're soaking up all that dB room if you're going to have your melody too high, and everything is going to sound muddy because they're all fighting for space in the mix there. So if you're just starting to do this, it may take some adjustment to get used to. If you're used to, you know, not referencing your melody to the metronome there, you may feel like that your beat is way too quiet now and you can't work with it. One solution is, well, just turn up your interface. You know what I'm saying? There's no problem in turning up the interface as long as it's not too loud and blows out your speakers or whatever, but just turn up your interface. I will also let you guys in on a little secret plugin that I use. It's by Native Instruments. It is a Transient Master here. Now I know what I said about mastering. I wouldn't consider this an actual mastering plugin. This is a transient master, meaning it's going to bring out the bright areas of the mix here, especially the drums. So if you're looking for a little extra pop in your drums, this is going to really make it stand out. There's several other plugins that can do this. I know if you're on FL Studio, they have a transient plugin as well. Isotope may have one, I'm not sure. If you're on FL, a free one would be the Fruity Soft Clipper. I personally don't use it or don't know how to use it, but a lot of producers do use that, and it makes their drums pop a little more. So there's your solution. If it's too quiet for you and you want to get that loudness back, you can do that there. So now that you got the most important part down, which is the levels, you can start doing some extra things here. So this next technique that I use isn't like old or a secret, but it'll definitely help you, especially if you want your 808s and your kicks to really pop out and have room to breathe. So let's go into our mixer here. I have this channel here on channel 30, low cut send. It's basically a low cut bus, and if you can see here, just got an EQ. It's cutting everything below 100 Hertz. And I double cut it here, even on the channel EQ right here. So what do I do with this channel here? What I do is I route all of my instruments that are not a kick or an 808 or some type of instrument where I want to have that low frequency. I route everything to this channel, channel 30, or whatever channel you want it to be. So every instrument is going to have everything cut below 100 Hertz. And then our low cut bus here will then route back to our master channel. So I don't have anything going directly from the master how its default is. I have it going straight to this bus here, which is going to cut everything below 100 Hertz. That's going to route back to our master so we can have our full beat here. So if you do all this, it's going to cut all the low frequencies out of all of your instruments, and it's going to allow your 808, your kick drum to have a lot more frequency room to breathe in. You're going to notice that it's just going to stand out a little bit more. So let's actually go into our mixer here. Here's our closed hat. You can see I got it routed here. This is a hi-hat again, and this is going to route back to our master. All this. Here's our sample melody that's going there. Here's a bass that I use. I don't route it here because I want those low frequencies, so it's just going to go straight to the master. Exhale, my little cinematic effects. You can see all these are going to my low cut bus, all of them. And then coming here, 808, that's going here. I don't want to cut out those lows because I want them to stand out. Open hat, percussion loops, all this is routed straight to my low cut bus here. So that's a tip there to help bring out your 808s, your basses, your kick drums. Everything's going to come through a lot cleaner that way. Alright, so there goes another very simple tip there for you that's going to clean up your basses and 808s. Going to go on to the third thing that I do, which is side chaining my kick and 808s or basses here. So for those that don't know what side chaining is, so basically I have my kick and 808 playing at the same time. So once my kick and 808 do hit at the same time, my 808 is going to drop out really quickly and then come back up. What that's going to do is allow my kick to be a bit more punchier, and it's just going to sound cleaner when the kick and 808 hit together. So if you're on FL, I'm going to show you exactly what I do here. I'm sure you can achieve the same exact thing on a different program with another compressor plug-in here. So going into the mixer here, we got our kick. I right click on the 808 channel here, so I have my kick, have your kick channel highlighted, and then right click the arrow down here and do side chain to this track. Just gonna bring a line over here. So now in my 808 track, I got a free limiter stock plugin. If you have FL Studio, it's free. On the compressor tab here, you want to right click this and click on the kick. So now that we got that routed, I usually have my ratio set to around 2.51. Bring my knee slightly over, and then the threshold is gonna vary depending on how loud and how hard your kick are hitting together. So I just have my kick and 808 that's gonna play now, and you can see visually on the limiter here what's going on. So there goes my little bit on side chaining there in order to get a cleaner kick and a cleaner 808 there. So far into the video, you probably noticing I'm not doing anything crazy here. You don't see any crazy weird plugins and EQs and all this stuff that looks like it takes hours to do. All of that is unnecessary unless you're engineering the final track. So moving on to my next technique, it's another very simple one, and it's panning. So panning can really help out if you have a couple instruments playing in the same frequency range and you don't want to do no crazy weird EQ tricks or nothing like that. You can simply move one to one side of the speaker and then the other to the other side. I do this a lot with my closed and open hats. Usually I'll pan my closed hat to the left a little bit, and then my open hat will go to the right a little bit. Again, because those two instruments are gonna hit right in the same exact frequency range there. So let's take a look. Here's my closed hat. You can see it's panned slightly to the left. We'll go over to the open hat here, pan slightly to the right. You can do this with all of your instruments that you add to. Generally speaking, I usually keep my main melody centered in the stereo mix. But going back into our mixer here, you can see my background stuff like the ambient pad and the cinematic effect exhale. You can see I panned them a little bit just to give them a little more room in the stereo mix here. And then even in here, my percussion loop 1, percussion loop 2, I bounce them off each other, one to the left and then one to the right. Makes a nice stereo effect. So separating your instruments by panning them left and right, especially if they are in the same frequency range, that's going to really help out your mix there. So now for the final mixing technique that I have for you guys that I do to all of my beats. I'm going to go into our master channel here, bring up neutron elements. I'm just using the equalizer portion of this plugin. You do not have to have this plugin. I just got it because it was on sale or whatever. But you don't have to have this. You can use any EQ plugin you want. Any stock EQ is fine. Just going to do something really simple here. If you look into the EQ, all I do is dip around 2K, like 3 to 5 dB. When the artist either cuts a reference or this is going to be their final song and they're 2-tracking it, what that's going to do is it's going to give their vocals more room and it's going to sound like it's within the beat rather than on top of the beat. So if you're a producer and you're actually selling beats online, such as myself, this may actually help increase your sales here. I actually had a guy email me. He says he loves buying my beats because his vocals sound like they're inside of the beat rather than on top of the beat. And I can guarantee you that's because I'm dipping out 2K here and it's just leaving extra room for the vocals. So this little trick here can actually really help you, just dipping out some frequency space for their vocals. They're going to be more happy with the product of their song. So with that being said, that's pretty much the 5 main things that I do in mixing when I'm mixing my beats. As you can see from this video, they are all very simple. Nothing's overcomplicated and crazy like that. And again, you don't need to spend hours mixing your stuff. There's no point unless you are the engineer. Leave that up to the engineer. That's their job. Even having a mix down like this and you're not mastering your stuff crazy, you might even make the engineer's job a little bit more easier. One last thing that I want to mention before we end this video here is that even though I'm saying, you know, don't spend a crazy amount of time mixing your stuff, yeah, that's true, but there's actually certain mixing techniques you can do to achieve a certain sound that you want for the record. So what I mean by that is you're not mixing to make it clean, but more mixing for sound design purposes, right? So yes, don't spend a crazy amount of time trying to get a clean mix, but don't be afraid to go and add some plugins, some mixing plugins, in order to achieve a certain sound you want, or doing some sound design. So, but anyways, that wraps up today's video. I really hope you guys learned something. If you have questions, I'm sure a lot of you guys have questions, comments, concerns. Please leave those in the comments for me. I'll definitely reply and get back to you on those. If there's anything I missed, anything more you want to see, please leave those down below for me as well. I will definitely get to those. Really hope you guys enjoyed today's video, even though I didn't bring you a new beat and break it down in detail today. Again, if I did that, this video would be crazy long. This might be a long video just in itself on the mixing subject I'm talking about. So I will bring back some new beats to break down for you guys. After next week, again next week, I'm going to really dive into structuring. I have a lot to say about that. That's going to be a whole video within itself. I wanted to combine the structuring and mixing, but again, structuring might be a long video too. I got a lot I want to say about that and how I feel and approach that. So stay tuned for that next week. That's going to be very important. But yeah, as I said, leave some comments for me, questions. I will definitely 100% get back to you. And I appreciate you if you made it this far into the video. I will see you next Sunday for some structuring. I'm out. Peace.